There's something I need to tell you. And once you hear it, it might change how you see yourself. Maybe even shatter some illusions. You were never that hard to read. At least not to the people who mattered. Not to the ones who were actually paying attention. They already noticed the shift in your voice when you told a lie. The laugh that was just a little too loud when you felt invisible. The way you filled every silence because stillness made you feel too exposed. Someone read you once, not through your words, but with their attention. They picked up on the pieces of you that you've spent years trying to hide, manage, or deny. And the wild part? You didn't even realize it. No one ever teaches you this, but being seen, I mean truly seen, isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's subtle, quiet, surgical. The best readers don't announce what they've learned. They just remember it. Every detail, every crack in your mask. NZ didn't teach people how to read others to control them. That wasn't the point. He taught us what happens when we don't read people, when we confuse their performance for their personality, when we fall for the character they're playing, or worse, when we fall for our own. This video isn't about tricks. It's not about reading body language or manipulating a conversation. This is about understanding people at the deepest level, where truth lives in the pauses, in the tone, under the tone, in what's not being said. And by the time we're done, you won't just understand how to read others. You'll realize people have been reading you all along. This isn't the start of clarity, it's the end of hiding. Most people walk through the world thinking they're mysterious, like they're hard to figure out. They carry themselves with confidence, speak with precision, and present a polished version of who they are. But that's not deception, it's defense. They're not faking it, they're protecting themselves. NZ understood that people don't speak from truth, they speak from protection. He believed language wasn't created to reveal who we are. It was created to help us survive, to belong, to stay safe. So when someone speaks, you're not hearing their soul. You're hearing their defense mechanism. You're hearing the script they've written to explain why their mask deserves love. But here's the catch. People leak truth. In the tension in their bodies, in the awkward silences, in the little mismatches between what they say and how they say it. NZ didn't just study words, he studied contradiction. He believed the real truth doesn't live in what's said, it lives in what's avoided. And once you start paying attention through that lens, the world becomes transparent. The guy who's always talking, always on, he's afraid of stillness. The woman obsessed with perfection, she's battling inner chaos. The people who judge others the most, they're just seeing their own unresolved shame reflected back. People aren't complicated. They're patterned. Patterns shaped by fear, childhood wounds, and pain. Repeated so many times, they've become what we call personality. Once you start to see people as patterns instead of puzzles, you won't be able to unsee it. What used to feel like arrogance will start to look like insecurity. What once felt like rejection, it'll start making perfect sense. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need a PhD to do this. You don't need a psychology degree or some supernatural intuition. You just need to stop believing everything people say and start watching what they do. Nietzsche was right. People aren't hiding from you. They're hiding from themselves. Every profound spirit wears a mask. That's what NZ said. And it wasn't just poetic, it was dangerous. Because once you understand that, you stop trusting the surface. You stop believing the smile. You stop confusing kindness for goodness. You realize that what someone shows you isn't who they are. It's who they think they have to be. Masks aren't worn to deceive. They're worn to survive. And that lesson starts early. Cry too loudly, you're too sensitive. Ask too many questions, you're difficult. Shine too brightly, you're full of yourself. So we adapt, we soften, we perform. And eventually, we forget we're even performing. We call it our personality. But Nietzsche knew the truth. Most identities, the ones people present to the world, they're not false, but they are masks. Masks layered over wounds. The deeper the spirit, the thicker the disguise. Because the more powerful your authenticity, the more threatening it feels, not just to others, but to yourself. But masks, no matter how well made, always leak. They leak through the body, through stiff shoulders, restless hands. They leak through tone, the voice that's too steady, too practiced, the laugh that doesn't quite reach the eyes. They leak through discomfort, when someone changes the subject too fast, when they over-explain, when silence starts to feel suffocating. Real identity doesn't live in what people say. It lives in their contradictions. The person who says, "I'm fine," while grinding their teeth. The one who champions positivity, but can't handle silence. The person who claims not to care what others think, but checks their phone every 5 seconds to see who's paying attention. That's not deceit. That's the mask cracking. And if you're really watching, you'll see the real person slipping through. Not polished, not confident, but real, raw, scared, honest. And here's the twist. When you stop believing in everyone else's masks, something unexpected happens. You start questioning your own. You start to wonder how many times you've laughed too loudly, or said, "I'm good," when you weren't. How many times you've performed instead of connected. And that's where clarity really begins. Not when you get better at reading others, but when you finally admit you were never unreadable either. Reading people isn't magic. It's not a special skill. It's not some sixth sense only empaths or gifted minds have. Smart people aren't born that way. They just pay attention. They notice what others ignore. They don't just hear words. They track tone, tension, timing. They see the same signals you do. They just don't dismiss them. Because truth isn't hidden. It's repeated. Over and over. Until it becomes a pattern. You've probably heard someone say, "I just have a gut feeling about them." But smart readers, they don't rely on gut feelings. They rely on data. Subtle, consistent signals that show up again and again across conversations, moods, and moments. It starts with tone shifts, like when someone agrees with you, but hesitates just long enough to make you doubt they mean it. Or when someone's voice rises unnaturally high because they're trying to sound confident, but deep down, they're not. Then come the contradictions. The guy who insists he's so chill but constantly corrects people. The man who claims he doesn't care about status but keeps name-dropping every 5 minutes. The woman who preaches independence but is always waiting to be chosen. Those aren't slip-ups, they're patterns. And then there's the timing, the strange delay after you ask a personal question. The way someone suddenly changes the subject when things get too close. The way they repeat themselves, not because they forgot, but because silence feels too intimate. These aren't flaws, they're fault lines. Cracks in the performance where the truth begins to leak out. The most perceptive people aren't focused on what's obvious. They're watching for what feels off. A momentary pause, a stiffness in the posture, an energy shift. They're not obsessed with the facts. They're tuned into emotional fingerprints, the small habits, reactions, and quirks people don't realize they're showing. Because real clarity isn't magic. It's not even intuition. It's discipline. It's the ability to sit with someone, stay silent just a little longer, and catch the truth they didn't mean to reveal. Once you learn to do that, the world stops feeling confusing. People stop surprising you. And the masks they wear, they start to look like glass. These aren't just psychological tricks. They're tools, not to manipulate people, but to cut through the illusion. Because here's what NZ taught, and it's something you need to remember. 1. Everyone wears a mask, not because they're fake, but because they're afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of judgment, afraid that their real self might not be enough. So the louder the confidence, the more fragile the person behind it. 2. People attack in others what they can't face in themselves. Mocking someone's arrogance might be your own self-doubt in disguise. Calling someone fake, maybe you're just frustrated with your own pretending. Most criticism is a mirror, not a weapon. 3. Silence is louder than speech. Truth doesn't always come in words. It slips out in the sigh, the glance, the smile that doesn't match the mood. People avoid what reveals them, and that avoidance is a confession in itself. 4. Self-deception always comes first. People don't lie to you to be cruel. They lie to themselves first. I'm fine. I've moved on. I don't care. They say it enough. They believe it because they have to. 5. Criticism isn't analysis. It's autobiography. When someone can't stop pointing out flaws in the world, they're not showing insight. They're showing pain. Every complaint has a backstory, and often it's unresolved. 6. Confidence is often guilt in costume. The people who look the most put together. Sometimes they're just holding back a secret they've never made peace with. 7. Exaggeration hides insecurity. I never care. I'm always happy. I don't need anyone. The more extreme the claim, the louder the fear behind it. 8. The need for control comes from inner chaos. People who micromanage everything aren't strong. They're scared. Controlling the outside world is easier than confronting the storm inside. 9. Loud morality often hides silent shame. The louder someone proclaims their virtue, the more likely they're hiding something behind it. True goodness is quiet. Loudness is insecurity trying to sound holy. 10. It's not pain people fear. It's being seen. Vulnerability doesn't scare people because it hurts. It scares them because it threatens the identity they've worked so hard to build. Exposure feels like ego death. 11. What someone defends the most is what they doubt the deepest. When someone over-explains their beliefs or choices, they're not trying to convince you. They're trying to convince themselves. 12. The need to be remembered often masks the fear of being forgotten. People who crave visibility, who need the spotlight, aren't vain. They're scared they don't matter. 13. Envy dresses up as hate. People don't always attack what they dislike. They attack what they desire, but don't believe they can have. It's not that they hate you. It's that they don't believe they can be you. 14. People don't speak from logic. They speak from pain. Beliefs aren't built from data. They're built from scars. Every opinion has a wound beneath it. 15. Childhood doesn't disappear. It repeats. The adult who dominates every conversation probably spent childhood being ignored. The woman who hides her emotions, maybe she was punished for showing them. Behavior is biography. 16. Rigidity hides fragility. The more rigid someone is in their worldview, the more fragile their identity. Flexibility is strength. Dogma, that's fear with a megaphone. 17. Desperation can look like independence. I don't need anyone. Sometimes that's not confidence, it's resignation. Not strength, but surrender. Watch for the people who isolate, not because they're strong, but because they're tired of being let down. 18. Patterns are confessions. You don't need people to tell you who they are. Watch what they do, how they handle silence, who they chase, who they avoid. These patterns, they're not random. They're old wounds playing out in real time. And And here's where everything comes full circle. NZE didn't share these insights so we could walk around judging people. He didn't hand us these truths so we could diagnose everyone around us. He gave us this lens so we could stop confusing noise for honesty, so we could stop mistaking trauma for personality, so we could stop thinking that performance equals identity. Because when you start seeing clearly, people stop looking mysterious. They start looking exposed. Every joke, every overreaction, every silence, it all comes from somewhere. The only mistake we make is assuming it's random. Or worse, assuming it's rational. But Nietzsche knew better. He knew that people don't speak from logic. They speak from fear. They don't argue because they're sure of themselves. They argue because it's the only thing keeping them from falling apart. They don't brag because they're proud. They brag because they're terrified of being overlooked. They don't stay silent because they're calm. They stay silent because silence once kept them safe. The person who constantly interrupts, were they ever truly heard? The man who mocks emotion, was he taught that vulnerability is weakness? The friend who never asks how you're doing, did they grow up learning that attention was scarce and never meant for them? And here's the twist. They're not doing any of this consciously. They're not scheming or manipulating. They're surviving on autopilot. Because behind the sharpest intellect is usually a fear of being seen as stupid. Behind perfectionism, guilt that's never been acknowledged. Behind displays of power, shame that was buried just to function. And no, they won't tell you that. You'll never hear them say it out loud. But you'll see it. In the way they correct others too fast. In how tightly they cling to control. In the way they shut down when things get too intimate. If you're listening, really listening, you'll catch it. Not the mask, not the performance, but what it's protecting. And suddenly, it all makes sense. Behavior isn't a message, it's a cover. A shield built around an unhealed wound. And once you stop reacting to the surface and start asking, what pain is this protecting? That's when the shift happens. You don't just become more perceptive, you become free. The world stops feeling personal. The rejection, it wasn't about you. The anger, it wasn't really aimed at you. The silence, the coldness, the withdrawal, that was their pain, not your fault. And it always was. We live in a world of performance. Instagram captions, curated outfits, I'm doing great texts, everyone is on stage, even in private conversations. But Nietzsche saw this long before social media ever existed. He wrote, "People don't live as they are. They live as the version of themselves they believe will be accepted." That's it. We think people are hiding from us, but most of the time, they're hiding from themselves. You see it all the time. The man who can't stop talking about strength, because deep down, he's terrified of weakness. The woman who floods her feed with healing quotes, but hasn't let herself feel in years. The friend who never stops joking, because silence would make them remember something they haven't faced. They're not fake. They're scared. Scared that if they stop performing, if they take off the mask, they'll be rejected, forgotten, irrelevant. So they curate their kindness to be liked. They weaponize their beliefs to feel powerful. They flaunt independence to distract from a loneliness they won't admit. And the scariest part, they don't even know they're doing it. You ask, "How are you?" They smile. "I'm good." But their jaw clenches. Their shoulders stay tense. Their laugh comes a second too late. Their eyes flicker away too fast. They're not lying to deceive you. They're lying to protect a version of themselves that once kept them safe. The strong one, the perfect one, the unbothered one, the masculine one, the healer, the one always in control. In a world that rewards image over truth, even being honest with yourself feels dangerous. But here's the thing, truth leaks. Always. It slips through the cracks of control. The way someone deflects when the topic gets too close. The way they over-apologize for something tiny. The way they laugh too loud, like they're trying to drown out something inside. These aren't quirks. They're confessions in disguise. The ego's way of saying, I don't know how to be seen without falling apart. But as life goes on, as the pressure builds, loss, time, love, the performance starts to break. And that's when you catch the real moment. The sigh they didn't mean to let out. The pause that lasts just a beat too long. The way they go quiet after acting so sure of themselves. The way their eyes water before the sentence ends. The breath they take, like they're holding something back. That's not weakness, that's the soul surfacing. Even if just for a second. Because the truest version of someone isn't who they perform to be. It's who they become when they forget to perform. If you're the kind of person who sees this, who notices the moment energy shifts in a room before anyone speaks, who catches the cracks in the mask, then you're not just observant. You're witnessing something sacred. You're seeing the version of them they haven't even dared to meet themselves. The one buried beneath identity, survival, and years of trying to be accepted. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to realize reading people isn't about judgment, it's about compassion. Because when someone breaks character, they're finally showing you who they really are. And there's a moment that sneaks up on you, quiet, unannounced. You're in a conversation, someone's complaining, bragging, or posturing, and for the first time, you don't react. You don't feel defensive. You don't take it personally. You just see them, the tone, the pacing, the over-explaining, the hollowness in the confidence, the tension behind the silence. And it clicks. This was never about me. The things that used to trigger you, the coldness, the arrogance, the neediness, they don't sting the same way anymore. Because now you understand, they're just wounds, wearing armor. It's not weakness, it's survival, dressed up as dominance, as virtue, as silence. And when you see it clearly, something irreversible happens. Empathy becomes inevitable. Not the sweet, polite kind. The kind that comes from grief. The kind that comes from knowing how damn hard it is to just be human. Because once you see the guilt behind the bragging, the fear behind the control, the sadness behind the silence, you stop reacting to the mask and start recognizing the pain that built it. That's what Enzi wanted. Not to give you power over others, but to protect you from being fooled. Because the real danger isn't that people lie to you. It's that they believe their own lies and expect you to believe them too. They expect you to interact with the character, not the human. And if you can't see through the mask, you fall for the performance. You chase validation from people who are deeply insecure. You fear rejection from someone terrified of connection. You feel inferior to someone who's quietly falling apart. Once you start seeing people clearly, everything changes. Rejection doesn't shake you, because you know it's just pain speaking. Conflict doesn't pull you in, because drama isn't danger, it's dysregulation. Confidence doesn't impress you, because loud doesn't mean strong. You stop reacting, you start seeing, and in that seeing, clarity kills confusion. You stop asking, why are they doing this to me? You start asking, what are they trying to protect? And in that moment, anger dies. Because you're no longer fighting shadows. You're no longer mistaking someone else's trauma for your truth. You don't become weaker. You become unshakable. Not because you're cold, but because you're awake. Awake to the patterns. Awake to the pain. Awake to the fact that most people aren't dangerous. They're scared. And once you realize that, you don't need to fight. You just understand. Because when you see clearly, manipulation dies, resentment fades, and power returns to you. You were never becoming a reader. You were remembering something ancient. The truth was always visible. No one ever taught you how to see it. But now, you do. Now you understand. What looked like ego was fear. What felt like rejection was self-protection. What you took personally was never about you. You're not just reading people now. You're remembering that the patterns were always there. You just needed someone to point to them. And here's the paradox. The clearer you see others, the less you feel the need to defend yourself. Because what used to hurt doesn't even touch you anymore. You don't stand above people, you stand with them. Finally seeing what they've been too afraid to face. This was never about judgment. This was always about awakening to the pain behind the perfection, to the wounds behind the performance, to the humanity behind the behavior. If you've ever felt misunderstood, like no one really got your silence, or your softness, or your strength, now you know why. They weren't trying to misunderstand you. They just couldn't see through your mask, because they were wearing one too. People in masks can't recognize the faces of others. But here's what Nietzsche understood best. Power isn't about being unreadable. It's about being fully seen, deeply, honestly, and still being chosen. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength. So don't forget, you were never truly hidden. They already knew who you were. The only one who didn't was you. But not anymore. Now you finally do.